My younger son, Marcus, a pilot, called me. Mom, something weird is happening. My sister-in-law, Emma, is at the house. Yes, she is, I said. She's in the garden. His voice got quiet like a whisper. That's impossible. I just watched her get on my plane. She's flying to New York right now. Right then, I heard the garden gate close behind me. I'm glad you're home. If you're watching this video, please like, subscribe to Granny's Voice, and tell me in the comments where you're watching my story from. I want to know how far it has reached. This morning felt normal. I was washing clothes in the backyard. My older son, David, had gone to his office job early, making the house peaceful. His daughter, my sweet granddaughter, Lucy, that smart little girl of 8, had already left on the school bus. And Emma, my daughter-in-law, David's wife, had just gone to water the flowers. Her gentle voice called to me. Mom, I'm going to check the mailbox. Okay, I smiled back. I had just hung the last shirt when the phone rang loudly. I wiped my wet hands on my dress and hurried inside. The happy voice of my younger son, Marcus, came through the phone. Mom, I wanted to say hello. I have some free time before my next flight. Hearing his voice made me feel warm inside. Marcus is my joy, a young pilot who travels everywhere, living his dream of flying planes like he wanted since he was little. I smiled and asked him questions about his work, about how he felt. He laughed happily and said everything was perfect, that his job was going great. But then his voice changed, like he wasn't sure about something. Hey Mom, something really strange happened. My sister-in-law is at the house. I felt confused. I looked toward the garden where I could see Emma picking tomatoes. Of course she is, sweetie. Emma is outside in the garden right now, I said, feeling certain. Emma had talked to me just 5 minutes ago, and she was wearing that yellow dress she likes to wear when doing yard work. How could I be wrong about this? But Marcus stayed quiet on the phone for a long time, so long I could hear him breathing hard. Then his voice became very serious and full of surprise. Mom, that's impossible because I just saw her board my airplane. She's sitting in seat 12A heading to New York City. I laughed, thinking he made a mistake. Oh, honey, you must have seen someone else. I just saw Emma. She was picking tomatoes and talking about dinner. I tried to explain calmly to make him feel better, but he didn't laugh. He didn't answer like he usually does. He told me in a slow voice, like he was trying to understand what happened. After everyone got on the plane, he went to check something and saw a woman who looked exactly like Emma. She was reading a magazine and wearing sunglasses. When she looked up, he was shocked. It was definitely Emma's face, her hair, everything looked the same. There was no way to be wrong about it. My heart started beating faster, but I tried to stay calm. Are you sure, Marcus? That woman could be someone different, I said, even though a little worry started growing in me. Marcus sighed, and his voice was now mixed with confusion and certainty. Mom, I walked closer to be absolutely sure. She's sitting next to a man in an expensive suit. They were holding hands and talking like they were married or something. Marcus's words felt like a punch. I stood frozen, holding the phone tight. My head was spinning. Married. Impossible. I had just heard Emma's voice from the garden. I had just seen her with my own eyes in this very house. But right at that moment, the sound of the garden sprinkler stopped. I heard footsteps coming closer, and Emma's voice reached me. It was soft but clear enough to make me jump. Mom, who's calling? I felt scared. My heart was beating so hard I thought it might explode. Just a friend, I replied quickly, my voice shaking, and I rushed into the kitchen to hide from Emma as she walked toward the house, her hands dirty from gardening. I closed the door and whispered into the phone, trying not to let my worry show. Marcus, I just heard Emma. She's here. She just finished working in the garden. Are you absolutely sure you didn't make a mistake? On the other side, Marcus went quiet again. And then his voice became harder. Mom, it's impossible. She's right here on this airplane. I'm looking at her through the cabin door right now. I couldn't speak, my mind went blank. I hung up the phone, my hands shaking so much I almost dropped it. The kitchen suddenly felt too small even though sunlight was coming through the windows nicely. I sat down at the table trying to breathe deeply, but my chest felt heavy with questions I couldn't answer. If Emma was here, who was the woman on Marcus's airplane? And if the woman on the airplane was Emma, who was the person in my house? A few minutes later, Emma came into the kitchen. She was wearing a clean, light green shirt, her hair was messy from working outside, and she smiled the same sweet way as always. Mom, I'm going to the store now. Do you need me to buy any bread or milk? Her voice was kind and familiar, like nothing strange was happening. I looked at her, trying to smile back, but inside I felt like I was carrying heavy rocks. Yes, dear. Buy some apples, please, I replied, my throat feeling dry. Emma nodded. She took her shopping bag and walked out of the house. I watched her leave through the window. I stood there watching her disappear around the corner with a storm of thoughts in my head. I didn't think Marcus was lying to me. My son had no reason to make up a story like this. He had always been an honest boy, very caring and loving with his family. But Emma, the daughter-in-law I had lived with for many years, was also right in front of me. Real, I asked myself, could there be something I missed? Is there some secret in this house that I, an old grandmother, never noticed? I sat quietly in the kitchen as the afternoon sun came through the curtains, making soft shadows on the floor. The old wooden chair where I always sit to read books to Lucy felt heavier now. Marcus's phone call kept playing in my head. Every word he said felt like a hammer hitting my heart. I looked around the room where family pictures hung on the walls. David and Emma on their wedding day, baby Lucy taking her first steps, and Marcus smiling big when he got his pilot license. All those happy memories now seemed cloudy and full of doubt. My name is Margaret Wilson, a 60-year-old grandmother who lives in a quiet neighborhood in Denver, Colorado. My husband, Robert, died 8 years ago, leaving me with 2 sons I love more than anything. David, the older one, is a hardworking accountant, always busy with his computer and numbers. Marcus, the younger one, makes me proud for becoming a pilot like he dreamed. My life centers around David's small family, my daughter-in-law Emma, and my granddaughter Lucy, and the peaceful days in this house. Emma. My daughter-in-law always seemed perfect to me. She was beautiful, hardworking, always neat and clean, from how she dressed to how she took care of Lucy. I still remember their wedding day, a beautiful party in the church near downtown. Even though Emma's family didn't have much money, they worked hard to make everything special. Emma came into my house with a confident smile and bright eyes. Like she was born to be a wonderful wife and mother. I used to think how lucky I was to have a daughter-in-law like her. After Emma left for the store, I stayed sitting there, holding the edge of the tablecloth without thinking. Marcus's call made me look at small things that seemed normal before. There were days when Emma would leave the house saying she was going shopping or visiting a friend. But when she came back, she seemed different. One day she was all sweetness, hugging Lucy and reading her bedtime stories. But other days, she was grumpy and would get mad at me just because I left a cup on the wrong shelf. I used to think these were just normal mood changes of a young woman, but now I wasn't sure anymore. My heart felt tied up like someone was messing with all the happy memories I had kept safe for so long. I remember once a few months ago, Emma picked up a pencil to write the shopping list with her right hand. Her handwriting was very neat and straight. But the next day, I saw her writing with her left hand. The letters looked different and messy like she wasn't used to it. I asked her, "Since when do you write with your other hand, dear?" She laughed and quickly said, "Oh, just trying something new, Mom. I'm practicing." I nodded without thinking much about it. But now that detail felt sharp in my mind. I was deep in my thoughts when I heard the door open. Lucy ran in, her backpack bouncing on her shoulders. She hugged me tight, saying in her sweet little voice, "Grandma, my teacher said my drawing was the best in class today." I petted her hair, trying to smile, but I still felt heavy inside. Lucy sat down and pulled out her notebook to show me. "Grandma, look. Yesterday, my mom helped me with writing practice with her right hand, and it looked so pretty. But today, she used her left hand, and it looks messy." The little girl pointed to 2 pages in the notebook, one with beautiful letters and the other with crooked ones. I looked at the handwriting, and my heart sank. "Your mom must have been tired today." "That's why it looks different," I said, trying to hide my confusion. But Lucy looked up with her innocent eyes. "Grandma, my mom is acting weird. Some days she hugs me really tight and reads me 3 stories, but other days she barely talks to me. My granddaughter's words hurt like a knife." I hugged her, trying to comfort her, but in my head, everything was getting mixed up. Just then, the doorbell rang. I got up, opened the door, and saw Mrs. Peterson, my kind neighbor, standing there with a plate that Emma had brought to her yesterday. She smiled her usual friendly smile, but I could see curiosity in her eyes. "Margaret, your daughter-in-law is so nice, but yesterday I noticed she handed me the plate with her left hand, and you told me she's right-handed, correct? That's strange. Or maybe she uses both hands equally well." I forced a smile and replied, "Maybe so, Linda. Do you want to come in for some coffee?" She nodded and came in, but her comment felt like a thorn stuck in me. It wasn't just me. Even the neighbors had noticed something different. I made her coffee and we talked about normal things. But as soon as she left, I collapsed on the couch with my hand on my chest. I felt frozen, like the world was crashing down around me. That afternoon, I went outside to the garden with a watering can, trying to let the water fall gently on the roses I had grown for years. The sun was starting to set. The shadows of the trees grew longer across the yard, but my heart could not find peace. Lucy's words, Mrs. Peterson's comment, and Marcus's firm voice on the phone kept spinning in my head like stones thrown into a still pond, making ripples that wouldn't stop. I was watering the plants, but my mind was somewhere else. I asked myself, am I too old now to notice strange things happening in my own house, or have I been ignoring things on purpose, wanting to believe in the happy family I always hoped for? Emma returned from the store carrying her shopping bags, but what caught my attention was that she was carrying them with her left hand. I remembered clearly that Emma always used her right hand, from how she held the steering wheel to how she brushed Lucy's hair. I stood there watching her put the bags on the kitchen counter, and I asked her quietly, "What did you buy, Emma?" My voice tried to sound normal, but inside waves of suspicion were growing. She smiled and replied very politely, "I got some apples, cheese, and fresh chicken. Mom, I'm going to make that baked chicken you love tonight. Does that sound good?" Her voice was gentle as always, but I couldn't help but watch her hands. "The left one?" "No, the right one." I nodded and turned away, pretending to clean the counter, but my heart was pounding hard. Was I imagining things, or were these small details trying to tell me something important? At dinner time, the whole family sat at the table. David was tired after a long day at work, but he still smiled at Lucy and asked her about school. Emma ate slowly and carefully, and even turned to David to remind him. "Honey, Lucy's school play is next week, so don't forget to take time off work." I looked at her, trying to find the daughter-in-law I was so proud of. But in my head, Marcus's voice kept echoing. "She's sitting next to a man holding his hand." I bit my lip, trying to swallow the worry, but it felt like a rock in my throat. Just 3 days later, everything was different. Lucy accidentally knocked over her glass of juice during dinner, and the liquid splashed all over the table. I quickly grabbed a towel to clean it up, laughing, "It's okay, sweetheart. Accidents happen." But Emma, sitting across from her, suddenly made an angry face and said in a sharp voice, "Lucy, why are you so clumsy? You need to be more careful." I was shocked, looking at David. He also frowned and said in a low voice, "Emma, it was just an accident." "That's all." She turned with anger sparkling in her eyes. "You always take her side, and I end up looking like the mean one in this house." The feeling at the table became heavy and uncomfortable. Lucy put her head down, her eyes filling with tears. I hugged her, feeling deep pain in my heart. Only a few days ago, Emma had lovingly helped her with homework, and now she seemed like a completely different person. I sat next to her, watching quietly, trying to put the pieces together in my mind. Today, she was mean. The other day, she was sweet. Today, she used her left hand. The other day, her right. These small differences, one by one, were building up in my mind like pieces of a puzzle I still couldn't see completely. I told myself I needed to calm down. But every time I looked at Emma, I saw a stranger, like she wasn't the daughter-in-law I had lived with for so many years. A few days later, I walked Lucy to school. She held my hand as we walked down the familiar sidewalk with big oak trees. Suddenly, she stopped, looked at me, and said sadly, "Grandma, yesterday my mom helped me with my math homework and she was so patient. Her handwriting was so neat and pretty, but today she didn't even want to check my spelling. She told me to figure it out myself." I knelt down to look into her clear blue eyes and I felt my heart breaking. "Your mom was busy, honey. Don't feel sad," I said, but my voice trembled. Lucy nodded, but her face still looked disappointed. I hugged her, feeling helpless and confused. She's only 8 years old. How could she understand something that I couldn't figure out myself? That night, we sat down for dinner again. Suddenly, Emma took a small notebook out of her purse and started writing something with her left hand. David, who was serving himself salad, suddenly laughed. "Hey, since when do you write with your left hand? That looks so weird." Emma stopped immediately with a forced smile on her face. "Oh, just experimenting, honey." She quickly put the notebook back in her purse, but I noticed a flash of panic in her eyes. David shook his head and didn't say anything more, but I knew he had also noticed something strange. I stayed sitting there, gripping my fork, trying to keep my face normal, but inside the doubts were growing like a slow fire. One morning, I took an empty jar and walked down the same familiar street to Mrs. Peterson's house. Emma had borrowed it a few weeks ago, saying she needed it for making jam. I knocked on her door and Mrs. Peterson opened it with her usual kind smile. "Margaret, come in. Let me make you some tea," she said, still wearing her apron from baking. I gave her the jar, thinking of thanking her and leaving quickly. But she pulled me to sit in a comfortable chair in her living room. The atmosphere was warm and cozy. It smelled like fresh cookies, but I couldn't relax. Mrs. Peterson looked at me with eyes full of concern and lowered her voice. "Margaret, please don't be upset by what I'm about to say. Has your daughter-in-law's personality changed? One day, she waves at me so happily and even asks about my grandchildren. But yesterday, she walked right past here. I said hello, and she completely ignored me, like she didn't even know me." Mrs. Peterson's words were another stone thrown into the troubled waters of my heart. I forced a smile and replied, "She must have been in a hurry, Linda. You know how busy young mothers can be." But inside, I was falling apart. I knew Mrs. Peterson wasn't just making conversation. She's a very observant person who always pays attention to details. If even she noticed how strange Emma was acting, then my suspicions weren't just my imagination anymore. I stayed for a little longer, sipped the now warm tea, and said goodbye with my heart feeling heavy. On my way back, I passed by Mr. Garcia's bakery where I always bought sweet rolls for Lucy. Mr. Garcia was behind the counter, and when he saw me, he smiled. "Mrs. Wilson, what can I get for the little princess today?" I asked for some pastries, and he suddenly said, "You're David's mom, right?" His wife came in yesterday morning. So pleasant and friendly. She even complimented my new recipe. But this afternoon, she came back with a frown on her face. She bought bread and didn't even say thank you, just grabbed it and left. I froze, gripping the handle of my purse tighter. "She must have had a bad day, Carlos," I replied, my voice shaking. I thanked him quickly and hurried out. Mr. Garcia's words were another knife, cutting deeper into the doubts that were growing inside me like weeds. When I got home, I made myself some chamomile tea and sat on the front porch. The wind blew gently, carrying the sweet smell of honeysuckle from the garden. I looked toward the street that led to the shopping center where Emma always walked. Suddenly, I saw her coming back, carrying her shopping bags, but she greeted me in a cold voice, "Good evening, Mom." No smile, no warmth like this morning when she had laughed about Lucy's funny joke at breakfast. I nodded and replied quietly, "You're back early." But inside, I couldn't help but watch her more closely. The blouse she was wearing now was bright blue, completely different from the white blouse she had on when she left. I tried to ask her gently, "Why did you change your shirt?" Emma paused for a second, and then quickly answered, "Oh, I spilled something on it and had to change at the store's bathroom." She smiled halfway and rushed into the house. I stayed there with the teacup in my hands, feeling like a heavy rock was crushing my chest. Mrs. Peterson's words, Mr. Garcia's comments, and the way Emma answered me. Everything forced me to stop ignoring these signs. That night we were all eating dinner together. Lucy was talking about school with her cheerful little voice, but I noticed that Emma only nodded without really listening to her, unlike other times. When David said, "Are you finished eating so Mom can clear the plates?" Lucy suddenly turned to me and said innocently, "Grandma, my mom didn't sing me to sleep last night. But the night before she sang that song, 'Twinkle, Twinkle, Little Star,' that you always sing to me, and it sounded so beautiful." I looked at Emma, who was eating her food without reacting at all. But Lucy's words felt like a needle in my heart. That lullaby, that "Twinkle, Twinkle, Little Star" that I used to sing to David and Marcus. Only Emma and I knew it in this house perfectly. So why did she sing it 2 nights ago and not last night? Why did she change so quickly? I got up to clear the dishes, but my mind was racing somewhere else. I remembered the times Emma would leave the house saying she was going to visit a friend, but would return with a distant look. One day she brought home beautiful flowers, saying a neighbor had given them to her. But another day she got upset when I asked her, "Where did you go today that made you come home so late?" I used to think these were unimportant things, normal behavior, but now they seemed like pieces of a much bigger mystery. I didn't want to believe that Emma was hiding something from me, but every word, every action of hers made me doubt everything. That night, after cleaning the kitchen, I sat at the dining room table and took an old notebook out of a drawer. My hand was shaking as I wrote the first line. 2:00 p.m. Emma leaves for store, returns 5:30 p.m. wearing blue blouse. Cold attitude. I didn't know what I was doing, but I knew I couldn't keep pretending that nothing was wrong. I kept writing. 2 nights ago, she sang Lucy to sleep, gentle. Last night. She was distant, no singing. Each word felt heavy, like I was carving my suspicions into reality. My old notebook was now filling up with notes about Emma. Every line was a piece of my doubt, like I was painting a picture I was afraid to look at. I sat in the kitchen, staring at the notebook with a heavy heart. I couldn't keep all these thoughts to myself anymore. They were like waves rising and falling, leaving me alone and confused. I needed someone to talk to, someone who would understand me, who wouldn't judge me, who wouldn't jump to quick conclusions. I immediately thought of Sarah, my best friend, who has been with me since we were young when we used to sit and garden together and share our life stories. I picked up the phone, my voice trembling. "Sarah, are you free this afternoon? Let's meet at the coffee shop downtown. I really need to talk." Sarah agreed immediately, her voice as warm as always. "Margaret, I could tell something was bothering you. I'll be there in 20 minutes. I felt a little relief, but the worry was still weighing me down. I put on my favorite cardigan and left the house for the small coffee shop downtown, where Sarah and I had shared so many happy times and sad moments. The place was cozy with its soft lighting and that wonderful smell of freshly ground coffee. I chose a table in a quiet corner where we could talk privately. I sat there holding the hot coffee cup, but feeling cold inside. I wondered how I was going to tell her about all these suspicions. How was I going to admit that I was doubting my own daughter-in-law? Sarah arrived wearing a light jacket and carrying her usual cheerful smile. She sat down and looked me straight in the eyes with that sharp but caring look. "Margaret, just by looking at your face, I know something serious is wrong. Come on, tell me everything. What's got you so worried?" I took a deep breath, trying not to let my voice break, but every word felt stuck in my throat. I told her everything quickly. Marcus's call from the airport, Emma's mysterious airplane passenger, the woman who looked identical to her on the plane, and all the small details I had written down, from how she switched writing hands to her mood changing from day to night. I took the notebook out of my purse and showed it to her. "Look, I wrote everything down here. I don't know if I'm going crazy, but I can't ignore this anymore." Sarah looked through the pages with a serious expression. She read my shaky handwriting carefully. "You've noticed everything, Margaret," she said in a worried voice. "Every time she leaves and comes back, it's like she's a different person. What do you think is really going on?" I shook my head, gripping the coffee cup tightly. "I don't know, Sarah. I just know I'm scared. Scared that Emma is hiding something big. Scared that my family will fall apart if I dig deeper. But I can't stop now. I have to know the truth. For David, for Lucy." Sarah put her cup on the table and looked at me with determination. "You can't fool a grandmother's instincts, Margaret. What does your heart tell you? I'm sure there's something suspicious going on here. You have to get to the bottom of this mystery." I hesitated and my voice became a whisper. "But what if I'm wrong about her? What if I hurt David's marriage?" Sarah interrupted me firmly. "Trust your gut feeling. If you don't discover the truth, you'll always live with doubt, and you won't be able to protect Lucy or David from whatever this is." Just then, Mrs. Rodriguez, the lady who owns the flower shop that I visit regularly, came into the coffee shop. She recognized me and smiled warmly. "Mrs. Wilson, what a nice surprise. Last week I saw your daughter-in-law at my shop. She was so sweet and polite. She even bought extra roses to brighten up your home. But this morning, she stopped by again looking so serious and unfriendly. She bought flowers and left without even saying goodbye. Is everything all right with your daughter-in-law?" I forced a smile and replied, "She must be stressed, Maria." But inside, I felt like I was drowning in confusion. Another person who noticed how strange Emma was behaving. I thanked Mrs. Rodriguez, watched her leave, and turned back to Sarah with panic in my eyes. Sarah took my hand and her voice became softer. "See, Margaret, it's not just you. Even people around town are noticing. Don't lie to yourself anymore. Keep writing everything down, and if you have to, you might need to follow her secretly. Not to hurt her, but to protect your family from whatever is happening." I nodded, but my heart felt heavy. I knew Sarah was right, but the idea of secretly following my own daughter-in-law made me feel like I was betraying my family's trust. I had spent my whole life taking care of this home and family, and now I had to do something I never imagined I would do. Investigate someone I loved. That afternoon, I returned home with my head still spinning with thoughts. Emma left the house carrying her familiar canvas shopping bag. "Mom, I'm going to the pharmacy for a few things, she said in a gentle voice. I nodded, but as soon as she disappeared around the corner, I opened my notebook and wrote 3:15 p.m. Emma leaves for pharmacy carrying canvas bag. Normal, friendly attitude. I stayed there watching the clock, counting every minute that passed. At 6:20, Emma returned, but the bag she was holding was now a plastic shopping bag from the grocery store. I was surprised and asked her, "Did you change bags somewhere?" She smiled and quickly replied, "Yes, the other one tore and I had to throw it away. I got this one from the store." I nodded, but my hands were shaking as I added to the notebook. Returned 6:20 p.m., carrying different bag, voice slightly nervous. My notes were piling up like evidence. Each line was one step closer to some truth, but also one step away from being the trusting grandmother who only knew how to love and believe in her family. On the weekend, David left for weekend work at the office early, and Lucy was at a sleepover with her best friend, leaving the house quiet with just Emma and me. I was organizing the living room bookshelf, trying to keep myself busy to push away the doubts that were eating at my peace of mind. But then, Emma came down from her room wearing a pretty pink sundress, looking as fresh and beautiful as she did in her early days of marriage. "Mom, I'm going to run some errands around town," she said in a sweet voice. She took her usual purse and left the house. I nodded, smiling, but inside a voice insisted, "Follow her, Margaret. Go find the truth." Heavy, 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 heavy. I didn't think twice. I took my old jacket, put it over my shoulders to disguise myself a little, and left the house quietly, keeping a safe distance behind Emma. The sun was warm, sweat was forming on my forehead, but I didn't care. I just wanted to know where she was really going, what she was actually doing. Emma walked quickly down the main street that led to the shopping district. But suddenly, instead of turning right toward the stores as usual, she turned left into a narrow path behind some old apartment buildings. The buildings were older, crowded together with faded paint and small balconies. I slowed down, my heart racing, trying to hide behind some parked cars on the street. Emma didn't look back once. She kept walking purposefully. She went into an even smaller alley where the sunlight barely reached between the buildings. I hid behind a small repair shop where a man was fixing a bicycle, focused on his work. I watched Emma stop in front of a red wooden door, knock gently 3 times, and then disappear inside. I stood there, my breathing fast and uneven, my head spinning with questions. What was my daughter-in-law doing in this place? This wasn't the pharmacy or any of the friends' houses she had mentioned visiting. I wanted to walk over, knock on that door, and ask her directly, but my feet felt glued to the ground. I was afraid of the truth, afraid that what I was about to discover would destroy everything I believed about my family. In the end, I turned around and walked back home, full of unanswered questions, each step feeling heavier than the last. I had barely opened the front gate when I froze completely. Emma was standing in the kitchen, chopping carrots with a light blue apron on, completely different from the pink sundress she had left wearing. She was humming softly and looked at me with warm, cheerful eyes. "Where did you go, Mom? I was wondering where you were." I stood frozen, my mouth dry, unable to say a single word. Only minutes ago, I had seen her go into that mysterious alley wearing a pink dress. How could she have gotten back so quickly? And this apron? I stuttered nervously. "I just went for a short walk around the block, that's all." Emma nodded with a bright smile, but something about her gaze made me shiver. I went up to my room pretending to look for something, but really it was to escape that look. To calm my heart that was beating like a drum in my chest. That evening, I was sitting knitting when Lucy came running into my room after returning from her sleepover, her cheeks pink from excitement. She hugged my legs, crying softly. "Grandma, my mom was mean to me when I got home just because I forgot to hang up my jacket. She's not like yesterday morning. Yesterday morning, she was so kind. She even made me pancakes shaped like hearts." I took Lucy in my arms, stroked her soft hair, but inside I felt like my heart was on fire. "Your mom was probably tired, sweetheart. Don't be upset," I said, but my voice was shaking. Lucy buried her face in my shoulder and whispered quietly, "Grandma, I miss the nice mom from yesterday morning." I hugged her tighter, tears almost falling from my eyes. My granddaughter's words were like a sharp knife, cutting my suspicions even deeper into my heart. That night I couldn't fall asleep. I lay in bed with my eyes wide open, staring at the dark ceiling. The images played over and over in my mind like a movie. Emma in the pink sundress going into the mysterious alley. Emma in the blue apron standing cheerfully in the kitchen. And Marcus's voice echoing, "She's on my airplane." I took the notebook out of the nightstand drawer and wrote a sentence I didn't even dare to believe myself. Maybe there are two different people. That sentence felt like a curse that made me tremble with fear. The next morning, I decided to go back to that alley. I couldn't bear the doubt and confusion anymore. I took the family photo that hangs in the hallway, the one where Emma smiles beautifully next to David and Lucy during last Christmas. I held it carefully and left the house, feeling determined but terrified at the same time. The alley was exactly the same as yesterday, quiet and somewhat dark. I stopped next to a small food cart where a friendly middle-aged woman was cooking corn on the cob. I showed her the photo and asked politely, "Excuse me, have you seen this young woman around this area?" The woman looked at the picture closely and then pointed with her cooking spoon. "Oh, yes, absolutely. She comes and goes frequently from the house with the red door, that one right over there at number 23. I thanked her, my heart pounding in my throat like thunder, and walked directly to that house. The house at number 23 stood in front of me with weathered walls, a red wooden door that needed fresh paint, and a small window with faded curtains. I stood there, my hands trembling uncontrollably, feeling like the entire world was holding its breath along with me. I knocked on the door, and each knock sounded like a hammer striking my chest. The door opened slowly, and I was completely speechless. In front of me stood a woman identical to Emma, from her facial features to her body shape to her long brown hair. The only difference was her frightened expression and her hands that were shaking as she held a small towel. I stammered, my voice cracking with emotion. "Emma." The young woman jumped back, gripped the towel tightly, and tried to slam the door shut quickly. But just then, another voice was heard from inside the house. A calm but serious voice. "Rosa, don't hide anymore. You know this situation is wrong, too." I looked past her and saw a young woman emerge from a corner of the small room, standing right behind the woman who looked exactly like Emma. She was slim with her hair tied back in a ponytail and had an intelligent but gentle look in her eyes. She looked at me and smiled slightly with understanding. "My name is Sophia Martinez, Rosa's roommate, Mrs. Wilson. Please come in. It's time you knew the real truth." I took a deep breath, trying to keep my legs from shaking like leaves, and stepped into that small house with a tin roof. The walls were stained with age, the concrete floor had cracks running through it, and a faint smell of cleaning products filled the air. In one corner, an elderly man coughed weakly, lying on an old bed covered with a worn blanket. I felt the small space closing in around me, but I still walked forward and sat down in the wooden chair that Sophia pointed to. The woman identical to Emma lowered her face and her voice was barely audible. "I'm sorry, ma'am. I'm not Emma. My name is Rosa." I looked at her, my mind spinning like a tornado, unable to speak at all. Rosa. The name was unfamiliar, but the face was too familiar to ignore. I clasped my hands together, trying to keep my voice steady and strong. "You need to explain to me why you look exactly like my daughter-in-law and why you've been coming to my house." Rosa looked up, her eyes full of guilt and shame, but she didn't answer right away. Instead, Sophia sat down next to her, poured a glass of water from an old plastic pitcher, and began to speak for her. "Rosa is very poor, Mrs. Wilson," Sophia said in a calm, clear voice that cut through the tension. "Her adoptive grandparents are very sick, especially the gentleman lying there. A few years ago, Rosa met Emma by complete accident at a bus stop downtown. They looked like identical twins, and Emma took advantage of that amazing similarity. She offered Rosa money to pretend to be her, to replace her for several hours whenever she needed freedom. Rosa didn't want to do it at first, but Emma paid her very well, and her family desperately needed the money for medical treatments and food." "Replace her for what purpose?" I pressed, my voice full of disbelief and growing anger. "Why would Emma need someone to pretend to be her?" Rosa looked up, her voice trembling like a scared child. "I don't know all the details, ma'am. She would just tell me, you stay in the house for a few hours, do normal things like cook dinner, help with homework, talk to family, and then she would give me money, a lot of money, enough to buy my grandparents' medicine and food for weeks." I didn't dare to ask for more information. She lowered her head, and tears began to roll down her cheeks like rain. I looked at her, my chest feeling tight with a mixture of anger and pity. Every strange detail from the last few months suddenly made perfect sense, like puzzle pieces finally clicking into place. The switching of writing hands, the personality that was sometimes loving and sometimes cold, the voice that was sometimes gentle and sometimes harsh. Everything fit now, like the final pieces of a jigsaw puzzle I had refused to see clearly. Sophia continued with a more serious expression on her face. I don't know if this information helps you, but I once saw Emma with a very well-dressed man at an expensive restaurant downtown. His name is Richard Patterson. I heard the name when they were talking and laughing together. They were holding hands and calling each other sweetheart very lovingly. At that time, Rosa was sitting in the car outside, not understanding what was really happening or why she had to wait there. The name Richard Patterson hit my heart like a lightning bolt. I remembered Marcus's exact words. She's sitting in first class next to a rich, elegant man. The small room seemed to spin around me like a merry-go-round. I tried to stay calm and composed, but my hands were shaking so much that I knocked over the glass of water accidentally. Sophia rushed to clean it up with a rag, but I just shook my head in disbelief. My voice came out choked and broken. Emma is betraying and deceiving my entire family. Rosa broke down completely, her voice filled with heartbroken sobs. I'm so sorry, ma'am. I didn't want to hurt anyone in your family. I just wanted to save my grandparents' lives. I looked at this young woman with a face identical to Emma's, but with eyes full of pain and genuine regret. I wanted to feel angry. I wanted to scream and shout, but looking at Rosa, I only felt deep pity and understanding. She wasn't the mastermind behind this deception. She was just a desperate piece in Emma's selfish game of lies. Everything I believed about my family was crumbling in front of my eyes like a house made of cards. I stood up, trying to make my voice sound firm and determined. Rosa, do you know where Emma goes? Do you know what she actually does when she asks you to pretend to be her? Rosa shook her head sadly, still crying. I don't know, ma'am. She would just tell me to do exactly what she asked, and that she would pay me well afterward. I was too scared and desperate to ask for more details. Sophia put a comforting hand on her shoulder to calm her down, and then addressed me directly. Mrs. Wilson, I know this is extremely painful and shocking for you, but Rosa is also a victim in this situation. She didn't have any other choice to help her family survive. I looked around the humble house, hearing the weak, labored breathing of the sick man on the bed. I understood Rosa's desperation completely, but that didn't erase the feeling of betrayal and hurt that was burning in my chest. I clenched my fists tightly, trying to hold back the tears that wanted to fall. I don't blame you personally, Rosa, but I need to know the complete truth. I need to protect my son and my granddaughter from this deception. I stood up feeling like the entire world was collapsing on top of me like heavy stones. Thank you, Sophia, for being honest and telling me what you know. I promise I'll be back soon. I left that small house, and the bright afternoon sun outside blinded me temporarily, but my heart felt colder than winter. The next morning, I returned to that same narrow alley where the stained walls and the red wooden door had become an obsession consuming my thoughts completely. The sun was shining warmly, but I felt a deep coldness inside, as if I was carrying an arctic wind of unresolved questions and fears. I knocked on the door of number 23, gripping the family photo like it was a magic charm that would give me the strength and courage to face whatever truth awaited me. This time, Rosa didn't seem as frightened or panicked. She opened the door with a still shy but much calmer expression and invited me inside politely. Mrs. Wilson, I was expecting you to return. Please come in and sit down. The house still had that same small feeling with the smell of disinfectant and the weak coughing of the elderly man on the bed in the corner. I sat in the old wooden chair and looked directly at Rosa. She was wearing a simple white blouse, her hair pulled back in a loose ponytail. She looked tired, but no longer terrified like yesterday. I took a deep breath and said quietly, Rosa, I want to meet your adoptive grandfather. I need to understand this entire situation much better. Rosa nodded understandingly and led me to the corner of the room where a very thin man with completely gray hair was lying in the bed, his cloudy eyes staring weakly at the ceiling above. This is Mr. Gonzalez, Rosa's adoptive grandfather. I took his frail, bony hand gently and introduced myself. I'm Margaret Wilson, David's mother, Emma's husband. Mr. Gonzalez looked at me, breathing with great difficulty, and said in a barely audible whisper, Rosa is not our blood relative. She's a child we adopted when she was just a tiny newborn baby. His words hit my head like a powerful hammer blow. I froze completely, my heart beating much faster, but I tried to make my voice sound calm and steady. Please tell me exactly how this all happened from the beginning. The old man coughed painfully, and then slowly began to tell me a story I wasn't prepared to hear at all. Many years ago, I worked as a janitor at a hospital in a small town outside the city, he began, his voice trembling with age and illness. A very poor family had twin baby girls. They were so desperately poor they couldn't afford to keep both children fed and healthy. The mother was crying uncontrollably. She said she could only manage to keep one baby. The other one they were planning to leave at an orphanage far away. My heart broke into pieces seeing that situation. I couldn't let them abandon that innocent baby. So my wife and I adopted her without hesitation. That baby was Rosa. He stopped for a long, painful cough and then looked at Rosa with immense love and tenderness. We raised her as if she were our own flesh and blood, but I know she has always wondered about finding her real parents and family. We have nothing valuable to give her except our love and this small house. I sat there gripping the edge of the chair so hard my knuckles turned white, my head spinning with this revelation. Do you know anything about Rosa's biological parents? I asked, my voice trembling with anticipation. Mr. Gonzalez shook his head weakly. I only know they were a struggling family from a town about 50 miles from here. I didn't ask many personal questions. I just wanted to save that precious child from a terrible fate. I looked at Rosa and saw her with her head bowed low, tears rolling down her cheeks steadily. Mrs. Wilson, I don't know anything about my real parents, she said, her voice choked with emotion. But when I first met Emma at that bus stop, I thought maybe she might know something about my past. She looks exactly like me in every way, but she never told me anything about family or where we might have come from. I felt like the air was being sucked out of my lungs. I asked Mr. Gonzalez if I could see any old papers or documents, hoping to find some important clue. He pointed with a shaky finger to an old wooden dresser in the corner. Rosa opened a drawer and took out a yellowed paper envelope, handing it to me carefully. Inside, there was a copy of some hospital birth records with Rosa's exact date of birth written clearly. I read the documents quickly and felt my heart completely stop beating. Rosa's date of birth was exactly the same as Emma's. The exact same date I had seen on her marriage certificate when she married David years ago. I gripped the documents with trembling hands and looked directly at Rosa. You and Emma could very well be twin sisters, I said, my voice lost and amazed. Rosa broke down crying harder, covering her face with both hands. So Emma really is my sister. Why didn't she ever tell me the truth? Why did she make me do all these terrible things? I looked at her, my heart completely shattered into pieces. I remembered the days when Emma first came to my house, glowing and confident, like she had been born to be the perfect wife and mother. I had loved her deeply. I had believed she would bring David true happiness and joy. But now I knew that she had not only deceived and betrayed my entire family, but she had also taken cruel advantage of her own sister, using her as a living disguise to hide secrets I didn't even dare to imagine. I stood up, put my hand gently on Rosa's trembling shoulder, and my voice, though firm, could not hide the deep pain I felt. Rosa, from this moment on I will never let anyone take advantage of you again. I'm going to help your grandfather with his medical care, but in return, you have to work with me. I need to bring this truth into the light for David, for Lucy, for our entire family. Rosa nodded through her tears. I will help you completely. I don't want to live in this horrible lie anymore. I looked at her and saw complete sincerity in her eyes, and for the first time I felt a small ray of hope cutting through the darkness of this storm. I left the house and walked through the alley, my soul in complete turmoil. I passed by the busy marketplace where people were shopping and laughing normally. But in my mind, Mr. Gonzalez's words echoed like church bells. 2 twin Bobbies, one abandoned, the other raised with love. And now their destinies had crossed paths in my own family in the most unexpected way. I returned home, my soul feeling like a battlefield after a terrible war. The truth about Emma and Rosa, the the secret of the twin sisters, was like a huge boulder crushing my chest. I stood at a crossroads I wasn't prepared for, to confront my daughter-in-law, the woman who had deceived us all, and to reveal everything to David and Lucy. That night I called Marcus with determination. My voice was steady, though my heart was trembling like a leaf. "Marcus, you need to come home tomorrow evening. There are some very important things I need you to help clarify and confirm." Marcus sounded surprised and worried. I could hear the concern in his voice clearly. "Mom, did something serious happen? What's wrong?" I said directly and firmly. "Just come home, sweetheart. I need you here. And if you can, bring Emma's passport information or any flight records you have." He didn't ask any more questions about details. He just said, "Yes, Mom. I'll be there tomorrow night." I hung up the phone and sat down heavily, feeling like the entire world was about to crash down on me and my family. I knew that tomorrow night would be an evening that no one in this house would ever forget. The next day, I woke up before dawn and prepared an elaborate family dinner. I put our best white tablecloth on the dining table, lit several candles around the room. I cooked the beef stew that David loves most and the chocolate cake that Lucy always requests for special occasions. I wanted this dinner to be memorable, not to celebrate anything happy, but to mark a clear before and after in our family's history. I was in the kitchen chopping onions and carrots, but my mind was somewhere else, wandering between that dark alley and Rosa's heartbreaking words. I told myself I had to be strong and brave for David, for Lucy, for the truth. But each cut of the knife felt like a cut in my own breaking heart. David got home just as the sun was setting, exhausted from his long day at work. Seeing the elaborate table setting, he was genuinely surprised and curious. "What are we celebrating tonight? Why did you make so much delicious food, Mom?" I smiled, trying to appear calm and normal. "I just wanted our whole family to have a special dinner together. Sit down and relax, sweetheart." Emma came in wearing her favorite light purple dress, with a soft smile on her face, but I noticed a hint of nervousness in her eyes that she couldn't quite hide. Lucy ran over to hug my legs tightly. "Grandma, the cake smells absolutely amazing." I stroked her silky hair, feeling a painful lump forming in my throat. I knew that after tonight, Lucy's innocent, carefree smile might never be quite so pure and happy again. We all sat down at the table, and at first the atmosphere felt warm and lively. David talked about his latest project at work. Lucy spoke excitedly about the science project she was working on at school. Emma nodded occasionally, making appropriate comments, but I noticed her hand was shaking slightly as she held her fork. I took a deep breath and signaled quietly to Marcus, who was waiting patiently outside on the front porch. He came in through the front door, and right behind him was Rosa wearing a simple navy blue dress, her face identical to Emma's, but with an expression full of anxiety and fear. Everyone at the dinner table fell completely silent, like someone had pressed a mute button. Lucy looked confused, glancing back and forth from Emma to Rosa with wide eyes, and asked innocently, "Why are there two mommies here?" David turned pale as a ghost, dropped his fork with a loud clatter, and Emma jumped up from her chair, shouting angrily, "What is this all about, Mom? What's going on here?" I stood up slowly, gripping the edge of the table to keep my hands from shaking visibly. "Sit down, Emma," I said in a slow but completely firm voice. "We need to clear absolutely everything up right now." I started telling the entire story from the very beginning, and each word felt like it was tearing me apart inside. Marcus's phone call from the airport when he saw her boarding a flight to New York, even though she was supposedly still at home with us. The time she switched writing hands mysteriously. Her personality that changed from sweet and loving to cold and mean. And finally, my visit to the alley where I met Rosa and discovered the shocking secret of the twin sisters. "You and Rosa are twin sisters," I said, looking her straight in the eyes without blinking. "You took advantage of your own sister to hide the truth from us. Tell us what the real truth is, Emma." Emma was trembling all over, her face as white as fresh snow. She yelled desperately, trying to defend herself. "She's making up lies to embarrass me in front of everyone. How dare you do this to me?" But Marcus walked over calmly and placed a stack of official papers on the table with a loud thud. "This is a copy of your flight records with the entry stamps from New York," he said in a hard, serious voice. "You can't be at home having dinner with us and flying to New York at exactly the same time. That's physically impossible." Emma looked at the papers, her lips pressed tightly together, unable to say a single word in her defense. Lucy, sitting right next to her, suddenly spoke up with an innocent but deeply pained voice. "It's true, Grandma. Some days my mommy is like an angel who reads me stories, and other days she's really mean and yells at me for no reason. I don't like the mean mommy at all." My granddaughter's words were like a sharp dagger stabbing my heart, and I had to fight back tears. The air in the dining room felt so heavy and thick it was hard to breathe normally. I nodded and signaled to Sophia, who had just quietly entered through the back door as planned. She stood there with her sharp, intelligent gaze and told everyone present, "I personally witnessed Emma with Richard Patterson at an expensive restaurant downtown." They were calling each other darling and holding hands romantically. And it was Emma herself who hired Rosa to pretend to be her and deceive this loving family. David turned to face his wife directly, his voice choked with hurt and disbelief. "Is it true, Emma? Please tell me the truth. Is all of this really true?" Emma bit her lip in stubborn silence for a very long moment and then suddenly exploded, yelling, her voice full of rage and fury. "Yes, it's all true. I do have a lover. I'm completely sick of this boring, poor life. I'm sick of being the perfect daughter-in-law in this suffocating house. Richard gives me a life that's 100 times better than this. And you, David, you're absolutely worthless to me." Her cruel words were like a bomb that exploded violently in the room, destroying everything. David froze completely, clenching his fists so hard they turned white with pressure. Lucy broke down crying uncontrollably and ran to hug me tightly, her voice trembling with confusion and fear. "Grandma, what did my mommy just say? What does it all mean?" I hugged her as tightly as I could, and tears rolled down my cheeks like a river. I looked at Emma with a completely broken heart. She was standing there with cold, heartless eyes, without a single trace of remorse or shame. David stood up slowly, his voice shaking with emotion. "Emma, do you really mean everything you just said? Do you really feel that way about our family?" She turned around and headed toward the door without answering his question at all. Rosa, who had been standing quietly on the side through all of this, suddenly spoke in a low but clear voice that cut through the tension. "Sister, you didn't have to hurt them like this. I just wanted to help you because you're family, but I didn't know you would go this far and be this cruel." Emma glared at her twin sister with pure hatred, but didn't say anything in response. She just turned around and stormed out of the house. The front door slammed shut with a loud bang, leaving the dining room in a painful silence that felt like death. After that night of terrible confrontation, the air in my house felt like all the life had been drained out of it. The living room that used to be filled with Lucy's joyful laughter and David's cheerful conversations was now trapped in a silence that felt suffocating. I had lived my entire life for my family's happiness, but now I felt like someone who had just survived a devastating hurricane, standing alone in the middle of the rubble of the home I had cared for so deeply and lovingly. Emma left after screaming those bitter, hateful words, leaving David with empty, lifeless eyes and Lucy with innocent tears streaming down her face. I knew with certainty that everything had changed forever, and there was no going back to the way things were before this night of truth and revelation. The story you have just heard has been changed in names and places to protect the identity of the real people involved. We are not telling this to judge anyone, but with the sincere hope that someone will listen and stop to think about how many grandmothers are suffering in silence inside their own homes. I truly wonder, if you were in my exact situation, what would you choose to do? Would you choose to stay quiet to keep peace, or would you be brave enough to face everything to reclaim your voice and protect your family? I want to know your honest opinion, because every story is like a bright candle that can light the way for someone else who needs guidance. God always blesses those who seek truth, and I am completely convinced that courage and honesty lead us to much better days ahead.